Welcome, everyone. It's great to see you here in this live stream. We're going live right now on LinkedIn and on YouTube. So if you're catching us by either of those live, it'll be wonderful to receive your comments, get your insights, inputs as we go. If you're watching this after the event, it's a replay, please do put comments and questions into the comment section, and we'll try and get to them while we're going with the after the session. Right, today I'm joined by two of my lovely colleagues on either side of me. We're going to be talking about the role of cities in climate action. And my colleagues are eco-cities experts, Isaacnezer and Njuguna. Did I get that right, Isaac?
Correct. You did.
Yeah,
you did
I'm
well.
close enough. Okay, good. Okay, and Tamara Trumbić. Have I got that right, Tamara? I'm not often speaking surnames, so that's why we're checking in on this. All right, so they'll both be sharing insights into the barriers and opportunities for climate finance in Sub-Saharan Africa and in Southeastern Europe. We're going to be exploring what urban means in the context of climate change and climate projects, including the Green Climate Fund. We're going to discuss the role of cities in climate action. We're going to talk about some existing programs that drive efforts of local governments. We're going to examine the challenges that cities face and look at the different ways the urban dimension is reflected, perhaps in projects. So we've got a whole lot of interesting things to do. This is the first of a series of sessions that we'll be running. So keep your eyes open for future live sessions that we'll run. We've got some great guests lined up, some really experts from organizations, including ICLE or ICLE, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, and C40 cities. So we're really looking forward to those. And this session as an introduction is really intended to talk about those broad issues related to climate finance and cities and mobilizing climate action in cities. Right, so welcome Tamara, welcome Isaac. Really great to have you here on the show. Tamara, just tell us a bit about your background, what brought you to this work, what inspired you to get involved?
Well, yeah, first, hello to everyone. And I'm from Croatia, I'm from Zagreb, but also I was spending a lot of time, of course, on the coast of Croatia. I have a background in architecture and urban planning, which actually naturally led me to work with the built environment. And first, at the start of my career, I worked in spatial and urban planning, and then I got to work with one UN agency on urban development project. And that experience actually opened doors to further roles and experiences with one development bank and then one very recognized city network. And yes, I always knew I wanted to work beyond my country internationally, and ultimately this aspiration took me to some incredible places and cities. And yes, now I can say I feel at home in several cities, and that's it. I think my educational background somehow was the main reason why I ended up in the working with cities, and one experience leads to the other.
And I know when you travel, you go and look at the cities and the architecture that is there, which makes a lot of sense. You've studied architecture and urban planning. Isaac, on your side, what brought you to this work? Tell us a little of your background.
Yeah, so first, hello everyone from Nairobi, Kenya, East Africa. A little about my background. I think I identify much more as a city person. I was born in one of Kenya's coastal cities. I was raised within the Nairobi metropolitan region, which is the capital of Kenya. And so I am part of a city. I've been very much in touch with the happenings around my cities. watched them really grow, and also just grown accustomed to the culture, the governance, the failures, and everything good and bad about the cities. And, in a cultural background where you can only command respect, when you're a doctor, an engineer, or a pilot, I chose to go a different tangent and, chose to focus on urban development, environmental governance. And I started my work or my career working in the informal settlements of Kenya and East Africa. These are spaces that are very much shunned by the wider community, and the public opinion is that these are spaces that are the bad of the cities. But working with them, what I saw is really people with a strong resolve. So really strong resolve by the marginalized communities who understand the predicament that they're in and want to do everything that's within their means to make their settlements and their spaces, that side of the city very much functional. If you're talking about water, sanitation, energy or power challenges, they just seem to have their own solutions, which, may not think they're conventional by city planning standards, but they work, within that context that they're in. So much of my inspiration to continue with this work and to continue the impact is, drawn from them. That resilience really makes me just want to continue to make my cities, which I identify with, whether coastal, whether Nairobi, very much functional.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Isaac, you're based in Nairobi, right?
Yes, I am based in Nairobi.
Yeah, excellent. So to all of those that are joining, please do introduce yourself in the comments. There's a comment section on the live session for LinkedIn Live and on YouTube as well, those that are joining there. Please say where you're from. If you're from a city, I'm guessing most of us are, aren't we? Please let us know what city you're from. That'll be really interesting to get that insight. The questions you can ask at any time. We're going to keep our eyes on the questions, have a look at them. If they come through, I'll try and weave it into the conversation that we have. So please introduce yourself, ask questions as we go along. Please feel free to let us know any inputs that you have. This session is going to take about an hour. We're already 8 minutes into that, so we've got around 50 minutes more. But we'll also respond to questions. If we do get too many of them, we'll respond to them in writing. We'll actually respond on the LinkedIn comments and YouTube comments as we go as well. We'll keep our eyes on those. So please do get engaged. We're going to have an interesting conversation, I think. From the introductions that you made, Tamara and Isaac, it's really clear that cities are playing an important role in your lives, right? And also an important role in society. Tamara, would you briefly describe how you've seen that importance of cities in the climate change agenda? How has that evolved over time?
Yes, thank you. Well, yes, as we all know, cities are homes to a large number of people, and they also are a place where there's lots of assets and intense economic activity. At the same time, cities as as governance units are managing a wide range of infrastructure systems and providing lots of services. However, there are also sources of environmental pollution and greenhouse emissions. And initially, in the climate change agenda, the role of cities was a bit overlooked. And over the time, their role was getting more and more recognized. And finally, they're really recognized as the main actors in both the climate change problem and also the solution. And we can say that, early on, the climate action was mostly under the domain of national governments and international negotiations, and cities were seen more as implementation sites for policies that were designed somewhere else, and they had limited authority or resources to drive any change. And then maybe in the 90s or early 2000s, local governments begin to get engaged in climate action. Or maybe back then we can talk about environmental issues they were trying to solve. And initially, the early movers were mainly driven by either progressive political leadership or international partnerships. Like, for example, city networks played a big role there. Like ICLEI had some programs like green climate city contracts. And yes, over the past 15 or 20 years, we can see, I think, significant shift, and cities have really asserted themselves as the innovators and the first to respond to some climate risk, like, for example, heat waves, flooding, or air pollution. And yes, this shift is definitely evident in the growth of city networks like C40, UCLG, or the Global Covenant of Mayors, which actually helped cities to pool the knowledge and set the targets, and supported their capacity for leadership, but also for execution of projects. Mm-hmm. And I can see in my own work across different contexts that this evolution can take different forms. For example, in wealthier cities, there is normally institutional capacity and political capacity to implement ambitious solutions and climate strategies, and also because maybe the cities can be hometowns to some cutting-edge technologies and have these strong, I don't know, research centers or have strong industry. And then they may try to test and implement their own solutions. Whereas in some lower income countries, the challenge is always because they have limited awareness and also the resources. However, there is a huge opportunity for leapfrogging with some implementation of soft technologies like decentralized energy or more efficient appliances, low carbon solutions, or I don't know, integration of resilience measures for new neighborhoods that are going to be planned or built.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I mean, that's that transition, isn't it, from implementation sites to cities stepping forward and saying we can take action ourselves. And in some countries, even the cities lead. Haven't seen exactly the fallout in the United States, but cities are known in the US for leading where a national federal government fears to go, right? Isaac, you've seen an evolution. You started your work in informal settlements. You've worked in different types of contexts as well. How have you seen that role evolve in those contexts you've worked in?
Yeah. Yes. Indeed, I really have, and yeah, I'd like to say I really like how Tamara has captured it. The evolution, especially the chronology. So I'll give a generic I'll give a general view, especially from my region. I feel now there is really a change in the mindset. There's a mindset shift. So cities are no longer seen as sources of everything bad, the informality, the pollution. So there's a new mindset shift that really recognizes cities as centers and originators of solutions. I think really this just stems from the realization that, the cities, the good and bad in them, are not only central to governance and economic development, but they're also hotspots of innovations that really address the urbanization challenges, the climate change impacts. When you look at, for example, Kigali or Nairobi, they're really emerging as budding technological innovation hubs, and they're championing solutions such as e-mobility, there's green building as well. Also in my region, I feel like the evolution really, how it's shown, there's a growing or a widespread Pan-Africanism that's really sweeping across our cities. There's a strong sense of belonging. When you come to Nairobi, you sweep through Lusaka, you'll find I love Lusaka, I love Nairobi, which really brings a sense of pride, the belonging, the association within the cities, and just, entrenching what we call people-led climate action and solutions. I also feel one of the ways that it's evolved is just recognition that climate action really goes beyond city governance structures. So there is a growth in the number of people, the number of groups and stakeholders who really participate in climate action, especially at local level. When you focus on our region, also at city governance levels, one of the evolutions you've seen over the last decade, for example, there's a strong sense of decentralization efforts, just efforts to make city autonomous and implement their own solutions. We see this in Kenya, we see this in Tanzania. So yeah, I really feel that, the role of cities has quite evolved. The more people really willing or involved in the climate actions, you're talking city dwellers, private sector, as well as policymakers. And also there is a strong preference to now action, also rather than policy in my region. So you're most likely to find community-led initiatives in climate resilience, for example, in informal settlements, than governance-led initiatives, which are, you'd say, are more policy than action.
Right. Yeah, thank you. I love what you said around the formation and the growing sense of identity that people have with cities. And I think that's a really powerful tool. I was listening to a book really recently talking about how to mobilize in a state, in fact, how to mobilize people not just throwing their rubbish out the window as they drive past, and the realization that as an identity was formed, that we don't do that. It was Texas, I think, and the slogan that came up was "Don't mess with Texas," which really fits into the identity of the state and such like. So seeing those things like I love Kigali, I love Nairobi and such like are powerful tools for action for those of us that are working for climate action to take some leadership in helping to forge that identity and building off that identity. One of the challenges, I guess, is around the complexity of environments and multiple layers of leadership and stakeholders. We're talking about people putting on the back of a taxi, I love Nairobi. Yeah, so this is right down at the level of day-to-day people working and living in the city, and the stakeholders right up to local government and the leadership within local government. They each bring their different priorities. I was speaking a month or so ago. You can find the recording of that if you want to, with Sophia Costello, who talked about Malaysia. And there was a complexity around local government versus the views of local government and the views of the people. Yeah, that sort of dynamic. So in your experience, Isaac, what has the large number of stakeholders involved in urban climate projects, how has that hindered or complicated the process of securing and delivering climate finance? Or maybe that's a huge advantage, that's a huge strength. How do you see it?
I think I see it both ways, or I'll say it really works both ways, both enabling as well as complicating. When you talk about the first, that's enabling, you'll find that when you have multiple stakeholders on the table, they bring different perspectives. Each has also different innovative solutions. So all of that are put on the table, and there is a high chance of getting now issues such as inclusivity, integration. Different sectors are also represented, different subsectors and interests. You talk about gender, you talk about social inclusion, environment, all these, there's a high chance of having all these integrated into urban climate projects. But now, on the other hand, how it's complicating, you find that when you have multiple stakeholders and governance structures on the table, they often slow down actually the process of decision making, and the ability to have uncoordinated structures is very likely at this point. So in my region, you find that many projects at many city climate projects are just stuck at ideation stage or at concept stage, because you have these multiple stakeholders who have competing interests, competing mandates as well, and they feel we don't want to be pushed over. We want our interests to, to be the one that's dictating all these. Also, another issue when you have all these multiple stakeholders, you find that in some cases, there are capacity issues and challenge. Not all stakeholders really bring the necessary understanding and also knowledge to climate projects within the city. So really, this makes it so difficult to build or reach consensus when you have all of them on the table. And one of the things I've really seen within my region is, you see the development partners, the World Bank, the GSA, they really get frustrated, as well as financiers, when we have all this fragmented, decision making from all the stakeholders.
Yeah, it's really a big thing. And Tamara, you've got some first-hand experience. You have led the UNDP project in Bhutan with the cities of Paro, and Thimphu. You've been there, you can pronounce them better. I should have checked up first. There were multiple stakeholders, and what Isaac's saying about the process of reaching a consensus and working with those stakeholders, that can be a real issue that slows down action, isn't it?
Yes, it can be. I would say that in case of this project, we were engaging with usual stakeholders. So it means that national and local authorities that will be in charge for execution of the projects, or later on management and operation of projects, because in some cases the assets are transferred from national to local governments, or the new utilities being established that will have to operate the infrastructure. And also we were engaging with stakeholders to be in charge for execution of projects, but also with stakeholders that will be the end users, so they will either benefit from these projects or will be using them on a daily basis. At the same time, we try to engage with the local private sector, notably with financial institutions, with the researchers or industry, if there are not that many members there, and to try, to showcase maybe some emerging initiatives, or give opportunity to these initiatives to be embedded in the project.
Yeah.
And yes, it was a usual engagement in terms of the scope of the stakeholders, but what makes it culturally different is that they are very highly consensus driven, and the meetings normally will involve large groups of people, and everyone is very deeply engaged. Everyone is really looking at all the details of projects, and so it meant taking a lot of time, being present, and following a more deliberative process. So yes, we sometimes have to slow down and be patient and create sufficient space for the dialogue. And I think that there is no single response of how to navigate a stakeholder engagement, because sometimes it's best to arrive to the country and try to understand how they operate and adjust to their needs and expectations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's what within ECO is one of our core values, is the one of empathy. That's being able to see things through the eyes of others, and you're so right that one needs to adjust to that sort of thing. I wanted to put on the little quick QR code. Sorry, Tamara, it's going right over you. But this is, if you'd like to scan this QR code, you can find a news flash about the project that you were working on. It's funded by the Global Environment Facility. It's a UNDP project on urban resilience in Bhutan. So I'm going to leave that on for a little moment. And I thought I would also make a shout out at this time to some of the people we've got. Ashish George joining us from London. You originally from Kerala in India. I think that's God's own country, isn't it, Ashish? And you lived in Delhi. So you've got experience of some really large cities there. And worked, yeah, fantastic to see you here. Welcome, Paula. You're at the moment in New York, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Ayub, welcome, joining us from London. And Racina, you are from Uruguay as well. Well, not as well. We've got someone from Uruguay, fantastic here. Great. Welcome here. Love to see that your firm is 100% women in Uruguay. Fantastic on that. And experts in urban planning. Yeah, if you want to drop in a link to your company website, please feel free to do that, so people know about it. Good day, Dennis from Uganda, so nearby country to where Isaac is. Here is a comment. Let me put this up. I just want to show it just in terms of an insight and an input here. I'm going to have to read the end of it because it's quite long. This is someone agreeing with you around the competing visions and decision-making centers hindering climate action. And so maybe Dennis, that's you. From Kampala, as an example, the political conflicts over sanitary landfill project led to a lack of public funding and lots of loss of investor confidence in the PPP that was being proposed. Result, he writes, is the landfills collapse, causing severe pollution in the city and surrounding areas. Any thoughts, reactions on that? That's the competing visions and decision-making issues. Isaac,
yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree, and it's something that's happening within our cities. You know, the national, it can be the national versus the versus also the city governance interests, especially where there is decentralization. It can be other forms of interest, can be private, you know, private sector stakeholders who really want to dictate, who want their vision, you know, to be the one taking eminence. So yeah, I really totally agree, and I can say it's quite a shame to see that really happening in this age and time.
It's definitely sad, but it brings the focus onto how do you engage stakeholders to avoid this? How do you bring it to, instead of us versus them, a we together have an outcome that is win-win for various people? Got a question coming in here from Alex. Great to see that there. This is quite a technical question, and I suppose it's possibly, well, fairly European there, from your experience of city administrations undertaking climate budget tagging for both migration and adaptation actions. Tamara, what's your experience with that in terms of tagging?
I have experience with the climate budget tagging, but on a much bigger scale. I will not even say now what it was. And I think, yeah, I have not been following what's going on and whether this climate tagging is really being scaled down to the local level now. I'm pretty sure there are cities across Europe that are doing some climate green tagging.
Yeah.
But I don't know how it works out, and if this is aligned with the EU taxonomy or some other standard. But I definitely think it's helpful, because it helps probably the city to really understand what they're doing and if they can do more. So it's can be definitely one tool to nudge cities to do more, and also it can be helpful when you have to disclose also the share of the budget. It's a tool and a method. For example, if you, I don't know, have foreign investors, or you go to international capital markets, it can be used as one more way to provide evidence. Of course, much more evidence is needed for reporting.
Yeah.
I don't know if someone else has anything to add. Unfortunately, I was not following much what's going on with climate tagging. Last time I worked on it was 4 years ago.
Yes. Okay. Isaac, thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think not at city level in my region. Definitely not. There's no capacity at that. So you find that there's been a push actually to tag the government expenditure as well as development finance at treasury level. So this is at a national scale, at a much wider scale. I've also seen this in GCF country program in Kyrgyzstan, where I worked, and we set across the World Bank, who are helping the Ministry of Finance and where Treasury sits, to tag the expenditure and to tag all development finance. So I can say that in developing countries, this is a national function, or is growing to be a national function more than a city function at city level.
Okay. Great. Yeah, thank you. It is a very powerful tool to focus minds on what goes for climate action. I think it's Dennis again saying in the group around Uganda, you've done that at a sector level. It's at country level, I think, here, where it is an emerging trend at a country level, and there's that question of, is it actually going down to the city level as well? Yeah, it's fantastic to see that there, Dennis. Someone on YouTube's asking, what is the accents here? So I better give some little insight there. My accent is South African. Tamara, yours is Croatian.
I don't know.
No. What do you say your accent is?
I don't know. Some people would say it's Eastern European. Some people would say it's Eastern European. Some people would say it's from Balkans. It's very difficult for me to. I leave it to others to judge and give the label.
Like you and like me, we feel like we're citizens of the world. So yeah, maybe Isaac as well. You're seeing it that way. And your accent is, should I say a Nairobi accent, or should I say a Kenya accent?
It's very much Nairobian accent. When you go to Mombasa, when you go to Kampala, they don't speak like how I speak. So it's very much Nairobian accent, but Kenyan, definitely.
Okay, now we want to move the conversation on around, and Paula, I've seen your comment here. I'm going to put it up just now. Let's first spend a little bit of time talking about the prioritization of stakeholders. For example, in some cities, there's a need for infrastructure development might be prioritized over the informal settlements. In others, it's an economic growth or sustainability initiative issue taking preference. So this is on priorities. How does one choose the priorities at a city level? And in your experience, have these internal dynamics along with regional differences influenced that prioritization and the overall success of climate finance initiatives? So in Southeast Europe, Tamara, how does that work?
Yes, I think that in this region, and I would merge it together with, I don't know, Eastern Europe, Western Balkans, Central Europe. And so the thing is that the basic infrastructure is already in place. There is sufficient coverage. So it means that, you know, in the history when there was urban growth, it was always followed with mostly with all the infrastructure. And the systems are able to provide some foundational or basic, they provide sufficient level of service. And many cities have inherited like this large-scale centralized infrastructure systems and urban planning practices from the Soviet or socialist era. And for now, for example, much of the focus is going into the retrofitting of this aging infrastructure rather than building the new infrastructure. Yeah. Or expanding the existing one. So it means like refurbishment of district heating networks or public, you know, housing blocks, or replacing the outdated public transport fleet and so on. And I would say, yes, of course, that especially private investors, they will be absolutely, they're interested in anything that can give them a good yield, but cities should be there to also invest in infrastructure, because what's the point of having all the shopping malls and skyscrapers and beautiful hotels if the bus is that will take tourists somewhere is has no air conditioning and is 50 years old and doesn't come on time. So on top of that, we cannot see, you know, it's not, there is no digital system like in London where you can immediately see how to come somewhere. So in any case, what I'm trying to say is that, yes, because of the, for example, EU and international policies, and especially, I mean, the abundance of EU funding, many of these upgrading or retrofitting projects are also done to meet contemporary environmental and climate standards. So in this way, I would say that all these infrastructure investments are definitely at the same time done in such a way that they are climate proof, or they help to meet all the targets in environmental and climate agenda. And yes.
Yeah, I mean,
someone has something to add. Yeah,
that's this positive influence of the EU in countries that have recently joined or aspire to join. That there's an upgrading of processes that embed some of these types of elements into them.
Yeah, the targets are really also, they are mandatory, and there is there is enough of funding that's supporting us to reach the targets, not only in the Croatia, which is part of the EU, but also in the Western Balkans and in the Eastern neighborhood countries. So I think I wouldn't say there is. It can be this. It can be compared to the level of competition in priorities in Sub-Saharan Africa, but Isaac can tell us more about that.
Yeah, Isaac, over to you.
Well, I'd say that you know, internal city dynamics and also national interests, they really play a big role in influencing how stakeholder prioritization, or you know, how climate finance projects are designed and delivered as well. So when I'm speaking about my region, you know, all the national priorities are centered on infrastructure development, you know, looking at roads, energy, health. So you'll find that, you know, any project around these areas are really likely to be, you know, they be prioritized, as opposed to local level resilience or adaptation project, for example, say in the informal settlements, or you know, or other city areas or sectors that are very vulnerable. So we also see this in our coastal cities in the region as well. So you see flood protection just plays second fiddle to infrastructure and economic development. There's a really strong you know, prioritization on blue economy initiatives, for example, as opposed to flood protection, which is one of the issues that's really plaguing our coastal cities. And I can also say, you know, broader city governance issues and dynamics also influence stakeholder prioritization. So there's different leadership manifestos and plans that really determine what type of investment or types of initiatives funded or are given eminence. So you find that the people with influence, as well as decision makers in our subnational or as well as city governance, they change quite a lot in the region. In Nairobi, since I think since 2013, we've had 3 or 4 different, leaders in the city. So each change in leadership also translates to change in prioritization. Yeah, so that's
okay. So glad you raised that, because that political cycle is a very strong influence on how one takes forward climate action at the city level. Of course, it influences national level as well. There's this cycle, and at one moment, net zero is something we're going for, and the next moment it isn't. Just talking about our current global political situation. This is really one of those influences and one of those areas where I think local action can be amazing, like the I Love Nairobi, that identity of, okay, we want to make a world leading city or a regional leading city or something like that. So great to hear of that example. And you talked about decentralization, both you and Tamara in the beginning of this type of thing. Decentralization brings its complexity of decision making, slowness of decision making, and then you said since 2013, Isaac, 3 or 4 different leaders. So that type of change. Now, this brings us to an issue that Paula has raised in the comments. She has said, how can institutional funds, and this is these ones, the 3 that you've named there, Paula, are global institutional funds like GEF, that's a Global Environment Facility, Adaptation Fund, AF, or GCF Green Climate Fund. How do they cope with this local government issues to fund local climate initiatives? Mostly their interaction is at a national level, and this decentralization and local governments and local decision making, that becomes quite a tension there, doesn't it? So, what mechanisms have you seen, or what would you recommend to ensure that cities and local governments are meaningfully engaged in these types of flows of climate finance? I mean, there's many other flows of finance. You can think of crowdsourcing, you can look at bonds and things like that, but we're specifically talking about these instruments, or these funds. How do you see that, Isaac?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think the GCF readiness programs really come to mind. I believe, they're really broad enough, as well as in really inclusive enough, to cover city climate action, as well as city climate or city development agenda. Also, when I look, for example, at the GCF mitigation adaptation results areas, I feel like they really apply to city climate initiatives, or can really be applied to city climate initiatives. When you look at mitigation result areas, you find these low emission transport, this energy generation access. When you look at adaptation result areas, there's building, there's infrastructure and build environment. So I feel like there is all these result areas, really bring eminence to, or rather make it possible to design city climate action or city, projects around that. But going to recommendation, I feel like, when you look at the accreditation, like it's been said, it's mainly at national level. So probably, if these climate funds could really, work on subnational accreditation, working with the local governments or institutions within city governance for accreditation, this will really, I believe this will really be, very beneficial, and it will also really streamline the initiatives to build capacity. For example, in the development of bankable projects or development of climate projects. I'm speaking from experience, in my region where, all the accredited entities or the direct access entities, they sit within structures in the national government, or also, in some terms, also private sectors. But not at local level, or rather, at city governance level.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, we have seen a city project at the GCF not too long ago. I'm thinking of the Kigali one, was approved October of last year, if I'm not mistaken. There's a municipal level project, and it's focused on informal settlements. But it really required the very active involvement of the accredited entity, which in that case is the environmental ministry in Rwanda, right? So that's part of this influence. I want to move on to talk a little bit about some of your experiences, Tamara, in Bhutan around that, and insights that you might have gained around that. While I do that, just before you answer that, Tamara, I'm going to put up, a little while ago, I put up a QR code for people to scan, and we got lots of people scanning it. It's fantastic to see. That was this one. What I would like to do now is just show you the QR code. If you want to go and find out more about this project, you'll find the project documents there at this link. It's another link. Feel free to scan it there. You'll see there the project documents for this UNDP project. We supported this work. It was a challenging assignment with a number of people internal to ECO, and then quite a number of local stakeholders. Do you have insights that are gained from this successful urban resilience project in Bhutan, and this urban dimension and the funds issues? How do you see that, Tamara?
No, I would say that there were many more projects looking at cities that we have been working on.
Yeah.
Just to inform the audience, but Grant is just, he has prepared the QR code for this one, but maybe provide other information on other projects later on. No, I want to say, not, site-specific, looking from perspective of one single country, that I think through every project that is aspiring to have an urban dimension or is really looking at the cities, it's these projects are still primarily led by the national government. And of course, accredited entity can be some authority from the national government, and even mostly executing entities will also come from the national government roles. But it's always, I think, important to try to reinforce the role of cities through these projects. So, for example, not only by engaging the cities, but I think it's makes sense to give some share of financing to the cities so that they can be absorbing this financing and deciding on their own how they want to spend the funds and what would benefit the most. And for example, this can take various forms, but what comes to cross my mind now is like Cambodia, where we have locale, and there, for example, municipalities really receive a portion of funds directly. Of course, in line with the program conditions, and are given some decision-making authority over the allocation, and are selecting projects from the investment menu.
Yeah.
And although I would say that, for example, in some countries, really, the cities are engaged, but they could have been brought further to the board, especially as in the execution, and this is not always happening.
I'm glad you mentioned the Cambodia project there. That's a local project, LOCAL. If people want to look for it, it's UNCDF initiative to working with various partners in various locations. And we, I think, have worked in 5, 6 of those projects to help them access climate finance. What is interesting there is the mechanism is using there's a GCF projects using a mechanism that they call enhanced direct access. What this establishes is a funding window that then is made available for local use in the form of on granting, essentially, for local level climate actions. And in those projects, some of them in the Pacific, in Southeast Asia, those projects, the municipalities then put together requests for the funding to flow for local climate actions, right? So that sort of arrangement. Yeah, so that's great that you mentioned that, Tamara. There's also, we've got a lot of experience working with the EBRD. They have this interesting mechanism, GCAP, which stands for Green Climate Action Plan. And in fact, just last week, I think we reached the final milestone of the project in Karlovac. But other places we've done that work as well, including Belgrade.
Tirana.
Thank you very much, Tamara. So, yeah, this is this type of climate action. So there are mechanisms that can work, but they're normally laid at a national level, aren't they? We were approached at some stage by a city in India to explore accreditation of the city at a municipal level for the Green Climate Fund, but that is a very complex and difficult project. So yeah, so thank you very much for those insights there. I want to head back to one of the comments that we received around. Here again, it's a little bit cut off, so I'll read the end of it. Question about low-income countries' strong centralization and the limited technical capacity. Isaac, you touched on technical capacity as being one of those barriers, but there's both national and perhaps even more local, posing real challenges. And he goes on to say, in that context, how can cities still take the lead in driving effective climate action and building resilience? Open question, whoever wants to try and answer this, please do, please speak up.
I think that, maybe this technical barrier and capacity barrier is easier to overcome than financing barrier. You can train people, you can hire new people, you can temporarily bring in some international or, I don't know, some other experts from some other place, and it would take time really to permanently raise the level of knowledge. But I think that it's still easier to solve than the financing barrier, which persists everywhere, and I think will continue to persist, especially in secondary cities or smaller cities that are not having, have limited budgets, and there are also national constraints on the maximum amount of the loans, or even they don't have the collateral, and are not even able to borrow in the local markets, and especially international markets. And even if there are grants in place, so as financing mechanism, they would be channeled to the national government simply for the reason of assurance. So maybe someone else.
These things are tightly connected, aren't they? Because one of the reasons that cities often do not have the possibility, for example, to access debt is because of low capacity to deal with and manage that debt, and perhaps the political cycle there. Isaac, what's your perspective in terms of the understanding on climate finance as being a barrier?
I'd say it's very limited, both in my region. I'd say at both national level and also citywide level. So you find there are intermediaries who really have to be in place for climate finance, or rather to unlock climate finance, through city climate projects. So when I'm saying this limitation, I'm talking about technical as well as institutional capacity. So just to engage, even understanding that there are some climate funds and how the climate funds, like for example GCF, really operate, that is is very limited. There's also limited technical institutional capacity for example project formulation. So. Yeah. I can say it's very much constrained, both, and this goes both ways at national as well as city governance, especially in my region.
Yeah, thanks very much for that insight. So as I said right at the beginning, this is the first in a series of sessions that we're going to have somewhat irregularly, because there's various business trips and travels along the way. We're going to delve deep into some of those issues that have been raised with external experts, perhaps also with other internal staff as we go forward. Just as we bring it to a close, yeah, perhaps we can just give, if you can, short sentence answer. Rosina, you've asked a really big question here. We're going to talk about that in future episodes very much, and also thanks for giving the information about your organization in the chat. How do you think a country that has not implemented any climate preventative measures could begin the process? Do you want to try and say a sentence on that, Isaac and Tamara? I can see you shaking your head there. What would you do first if you were in a big city in some place? What would be your first step?
Benchmarking.
Okay, thank you very much, Isaac. And Tamara, what would you do first?
I don't know. I would reach out to some international networks and get inspired, or not sure which country is that. Is there such country, or there will be more of such countries?
I think you should. I think you should contact ECO. I can also recommend, of course, Covenant of Mayors, the ICLEI, I-C-L-E-I, and the C40 cities as good networks to connect to and such like. We've got additional comments here. We're not going to have time to do that. If you want to contact ECO, you can see a QR code over here. Please feel free to scan that. And the comment that's just in, we will also put an answer to that in the chat. We're going to try and respond to each of the comments and questions in the chat as well, so that you can go back and revisit it. Straight after this session, this video will be available for you to watch if you want to watch it again, but we really do hope that you'll join us in the future. Thank you for participating in this session. We really hope you found it useful. It's an introduction to a series. We're going to dig in more detail on that. Both Tamara and Isaac had talked about and mentioned capacity and training. We are really excited to invite you to our Eco Institute training community. If you've enjoyed the conversation, I invite you to sign up. Our brand new training is being designed to support individuals and organizations to navigate climate finance from beginner levels to advanced ones. We're here to equip you, your team, with the precise knowledge, but also network with those other people in the call through the chat. Share this video with anyone else that you think would be interested in it. We'd really, really appreciate that to get the word out. I would like to say a huge thank you to all of you for joining it. I invite you to join our latest thinking community if you'd like to sign up for that. There's also a QR code here. We're bring in the QR codes pretty quick. So if you need to go back, just wait a few seconds afterwards. And then you can go to this point in the video and scan those QR codes. We'll also put them into the comments. Really, thank you very much. So we've had a wonderful team in the back office making all this magic happen. Huge thank you to Mariella, to Sandy, to Patricia. Of course, thank you to Isaac. Thank you, Tamara. Very much appreciate your input here. Would love to connect with all of you on LinkedIn. This is series of topics is part of our GCF Insight report campaign, which is a report that takes the temperature of GCF stakeholders. That's one of the reasons we went into that issue. And you can read previous issues and editions on our website. Please do sign up for the future sessions as they come about. Fantastic. Thank you very much to all of you. Really appreciate the session and your time. Hope you found it useful. Take care.
Bye.